The release of Cyberpunk 2077's RT Overdrive upgrade sees a new level of visual fidelity brought to a modern AAA game via path tracing, the ultimate iteration of RT. Alex is going to be going into how this achievement is possible on today's hardware and the implications going forward for this level of technology appearing more often in forthcoming games. But right now, the perception is that RT Overdrive is only playable to the limited few owning RTX 40 series graphics cards, or at best, top-tier Ampere-based 30 series offerings. Truth is, the upgrade works on any hardware compliant with DX12 Ultimate, and while the likes of iGPUs and such like are off the table due to lack of horsepower, it is possible to get a 1080p 30 frames per second experience on the RTX 3050, the $250 entry-level RT graphics card from Nvidia. In fact, you don't even need to own a graphics card at all to get a pretty impressive RT Overdrive experience. Nvidia's GeForce Now 4080 tier has its own price considerations, of course, but the point is that you can play this game at reconstructed 4K resolution with impressively high frame rates on remote client hardware. But let's return to the idea of Cyberpunk running outside of 40 series hardware. I got the idea for this video when I started to benchmark RT Overdrive as part of the RTX 4070 review. 4070 with frame generation is capable of running the game in excess of 60 frames per second using a combination of DLSS 2 balance mode and DLSS 3 frame generation, and I think it looks pretty good. The benchmark sequence you're seeing here is based on those quality settings with multiple GPU results overlaid. We're already in playable frame rate territory for the RTX 3080, but you can see that the 3070 is struggling. We have options though, reducing resolution, reducing DLSS quality level, but most intriguingly of all, a mod has recently appeared that increases performance by anything from 20 to 35% in my testing. Certainly on the RTX side, I think that thanks to this mod, any desktop GPU can produce a playable experience, while beefier RDNA 2 and RDNA 3 hardware can also run the RT Overdrive mode. Right now, Intel is off the table, unfortunately, likely down to driver issues. It's like a slideshow with ARC. But the RT hardware is certainly capable enough, and surely it's just a matter of time before those GPUs join the fray. But let's go back to the RTX 3050, the weakest desktop RTX card. 1080p DLSS performance mode. Now, I'm not saying that this or any of the other examples you'll see in this video are the best way to play Cyberpunk 2077 as such. This is more of a guide to getting a taste, or something more substantial, of the path tracing experience on current generation GPUs. So yeah, of course there are image quality compromises, but the point is pretty much always at 30 frames per second or above, and you're seeing the effects of path tracing in play. It demonstrates that this technology is eminently scalable, so let me explain how it's done and why the mod makes such a difference. The Ray Tracing Overdrive Optimisation Mod is found on Nexus Mods, and it's put together by Eroc and Scorn. First of all, let's put captured feeds side by side to see how it compares and how it runs. So let's start with the RTX 3050 here. Parallel lines on the graphing, just over 21% of extra performance, and the crucial thing, we're always in excess of 30 frames per second with the mod, where we are not without it. RTX 2080, based on my benchmarks, is 32% faster than the 3050, and so we can achieve similar results, but this time with DLSS quality mode, significantly increasing image quality at 1080p. Now let's look at the RTX 3060, which is a popular GPU. In fact, so popular it's currently the #1 graphics card on the Steam hardware survey. Based on my benchmarks, it's 11% faster than the 2080 and 46 points to the better against 3050. So again, a good 1080p DLSS quality mode experience is viable. The effectiveness of the mod in terms of the performance boost varies according to the GPU, but in all cases it makes a target 30 FPS experience as a baseline attainable, where on stock settings it is not. Of course, this isn't free performance. There's no such thing as a free lunch in rendering, and the RT patch actually changes aspects of the path tracing in ways that Nvidia itself used in Portal RTX to open up that experience to more cards. So here's how that works and what the trades are. So essentially, ray tracing is literally about tracing the path of light and its bounces against geometry. At stock settings, the game simulates 2 bounces of indirect lighting, and with the mod, this is reduced to 1 bounce. The most obvious degradation to fidelity comes from reflections, as you can see here. Lighting visible on objects in the reflection is now completely missing bounce lighting, as the secondary bounce is no longer there. If you look at objects in this reflection, they can look nearly black, excluding those areas that are directly lit by the sun or by local lights. Obviously then, this is a noticeable step back in terms of visual realism. For diffuse lighting that's readily seen everywhere in the game world, the impact here is that every area is now technically darker and indirectly lit areas are darker still. Take this example between the 2 warehouses. Notice how the ground in shadow with the mod is a great deal darker than it is before, as a second bounce of light from nearby objects is no longer reaching it. This lack of a second bounce of light, and less light in total overall, also changes the game's post-processing, as less light enters the virtual camera, so eye adaptation becomes more extreme. You can see that here in the garage with the mod, where it is much darker in the garage, but outside it's overexposed in comparison to the default path tracing with multiple bounces of light. So yes, it's a quality downgrade, but you'd expect some degree of adjustable quality levels as part of turning RT Overdrive from a technology preview to an actual PC release capable of scaling to a wider range of hardware. And there's precedent for this, of course. As I mentioned earlier, similar quality tweaks are integrated into Portal RTX, and it's how you get that heavy game running playably on less capable RT hardware. And so it follows that this is also how we're going to get Cyberpunk 2077 RT Overdrive to run at 30 FPS or higher on the $250 RTX 3050. So take a look at this benchmark table that shows how a big bunch of GPUs compare at the 1440p balanced mode option I chose for my 4070 testing. 1080p using FSR2 should be a viable target for the 6800 XT and 6900 XT from AMD based on the rankings here. It may seem a bit rough comparing cards like these to the much cheaper 3050, but we should remember there's a different level of investment in RT features from AMD. Nvidia devotes much more silicon to the task. On the plus side, in my 6800 XT testing, I could actually use FSR2 balanced mode with only occasional drops below the 30 FPS threshold. Assuming you have the horsepower, getting RT Overdrive running on RDNA 2 at a reconstructed 1080p is doable, and again, it's the mod giving us the overhead to make that happen. One thing to point out though is that scenes with lots of light, typically indoors or cramped city alleyways, can cause AMD hardware many more problems than Nvidia, so frame rate drops are more frequent, even below the 30 FPS target. So thus far we've been looking at 1080p, but let's step it up by moving up to 1440p and balanced reconstruction. That's where I benchmarked for my 4070 review, and that's the performance figures you're seeing in this bar chart extravaganza. Now what you might have noticed here is that there's a noticeable bump to frame rate as we hit the 3070 tier, where interestingly enough there's a big 33% bump to performance against the 2080 Ti, which is kind of surprising as that card typically delivers similar performance in most other RT applications. However, returning to the 3070 with lowest frame rates at circa 24 FPS, we're still likely to encounter problems, but again the mod does the job here in boosting performance by just over 20% and getting us above the 30 FPS threshold in most scenarios. The increase in rendering resolution and reconstruction quality works wonders in improving image quality, and this is kind of where we need to be. The fuzz has been lifted compared to our 3050 example, and we're back to a level of fidelity that befits the hardware. This is the point where Cyberpunk 2077 RT Overdrive really delivers a fantastic visual return, and the news only gets better once you take that same 1440p balance setting over to an RTX 3080. You're not at 60 frames per second locked with the mod, but you are usually within a VRR window, so you're getting a perceptually smoother experience on most PC desktop displays. Truth is, when you start reaching 3080 level hardware, the unmodded experience is eminently playable at 1440p. The mod simply pairs back ray tracing in the ways I described earlier and gets you a good chunk of extra performance on top of that. But we've got options, right? So what about trading the higher frame rate for higher fidelity? RTX 3080 is a great card and allows you to get some very striking results from RT Overdrive without the need to use the mod and reduce the quality level of the path tracing. I found that I could get some impressive results by using the NVIDIA control panel to set up a custom 3200 by 1800 resolution, 1800p then. At this point I can run RT Overdrive on DLSS performance mode, target 30 FPS as a baseline minimum, and the vast majority of play hits that frame rate target I've set, including some frame rate hotspots I'll talk about a little bit later based on my cloud gaming experience. The only exception to the rule came through this run through the Cherry Blossom marketplace, where for some reason frame rate tanked where it didn't in any other testing that I carried out. Overall though, this is a very striking presentation, even if I'd prefer to run the game at 1440p in balanced mode with or without the mod to benefit from an overall smoother level of performance. So at this point I've shown RTX 3050 at 1080p 30 with higher DLSS quality levels allowing the same resolution to look better at the same or better performance levels on the likes of 2070 Super, 2080 or 3060. I've also shown how the RTX 3070 at 1440p can hit and sustain 30 FPS or higher too, while with the 3080 you're in a good state in terms of performance on a VRR screen, or as you're seeing here, you can double down on visual quality with a 30 FPS target, though generally I'd only really use 30 FPS if I'm using a controller as opposed to keyboard and mouse. But there's good news and bad news when we're talking about 30 FPS. The good news is that Cyberpunk 2077's inbuilt 30 FPS VSync cab does work properly. It does properly frame pace the experience, a clean, consistent 33.3 milliseconds per frame, which is how all the 30 FPS footage in my video here looks perceptually smooth, or rather consistent. The bad news is that the input lag is tremendously poor, so actually running unlocked with VSync on or off depending on your taste will improve that drastically. Seriously, it's a night and day improvement. Owners of 60Hz screens may like to try Nvidia's half rate adaptive VSync option for another route to a properly frame paced 30 FPS with no screen tearing, assuming you're hitting your target frame rate, but it still seemed to be exceptionally laggy in terms of gameplay. So the point of this video has all been about accessibility, getting RT Overdrive to work on existing hardware of various budget levels, but there are other options of course. The 4080 tier of GeForce Now is the only cloud service I can actually recommend thanks to its phenomenal feature set and cutting edge hardware. It's essentially running a pared back version of the 4090 silicon with 24 gigs of VRAM delivering ballpark desktop 4080 performance. I'm running RT Overdrive here at 4K resolution using DLSS performance mode and frame generation, and kicked off with the benchmark which suggests I'm looking at an experience of 60 frames per second or higher. Now, pressing Ctrl and N within the GeForce Now client brings up one or two performance overlays, with the smaller one concentrating on cloud latency, stream frame rate and game frame rates. Interestingly, the Street Kid intro mission kicks off in the same area as the benchmark, but shows significantly harsher performance drops, with frame rate even capable of dipping down into the high 40s in my tests. Typically though, I'd say you're looking at 50 to 75 FPS frame rates, and that's with frame generation active. Now here's the thing, I was actually really impressed with input lag as well, even with frame generation in the picture. Picking out headshots with keyboard and mouse was pretty easy. This is definitely a viable way to play the game with a top tier visual experience. I've got few complaints about video encoding quality either, it certainly looks the part. In summary then, at launch, CD Projekt Red suggested that RT Overdrive would only run on 40 series cards and best of the best Ampere GPUs, but the truth is that it will run on any DX12 Ultimate class graphics hardware, and as we've demonstrated in this video, with strategic settings management and the deployment of the mod, it's possible to experience path tracing on any RTX card basically, and a good selection of higher end AMD offerings. It's true that 40 series performance and DLSS 3 frame generation combine to give massively improved returns. This really is a showcase for the Ada Lovelace products. But if you want to taste RT Overdrive on current generation hardware, this game is scalable. It can be done, and I invite you to do so. But that's all from me for now. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, share, and of course ring the bell for those notionally instant notifications. Do you have support a program? There's a much higher quality version of this video available for direct download. You can join our amazing community, interact with the team directly, get early access and a bunch of bonus material. So yeah, please do consider that. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.